giving an opportunity for the people within your team to grow themselves professionally. That leadership is quite an important factor of becoming a more successful company as well. That organizational development is a crucial factor for being able to further scale. Seeing this opportunity of solving a certain problem for a certain target group. And that brought us to the idea of building a digital platform for going to and living in Germany.
Tim Meyer is one of the co-founders at Expatrio in Berlin, a company that's created an end-to-end relocation platform. Now, I wanted to get Tim on the show because he started his journey as a co-founder at the age of 21. So I wanted to find out why he made that jump so early on in his career. Was there anything from his childhood or early life that made him go in this direction? And how has his life changed since making this step? What I got from this conversation was someone who was incredibly self-aware, someone who really values his relationship with people, his relationship with stress, and also the topic of work-life balance as well, something we go into a lot of detail in this episode. Now, I think it's great in these chats to talk about business building, the nuts and bolts of entrepreneurship. But I think it's equally as important to talk about the people behind the businesses and the impact and change it has on them. And that's really what this episode is about. Tim was brilliant. He was super honest about the last few years of his life. And I'm sure there'll be heaps of value for people who want to know what it's like to be a founder or are thinking about doing the same thing. So, without further ado, I'm Alex Bloisey, and this is the Building Our World podcast. Tim, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me. I know it's late on a Thursday evening, but I wanted to strip it right back to the beginning, as I always like to do with founders, because founders, it's quite rare to be a founder and it's quite rare to build a business in the grand scheme of things. So what was your childhood like and your upbringing, and what did the young Tim visualize his life and career to be like?
I think that's always quite an interesting question, actually. Also because I don't know how it was with you, but at least with me, and I think it's similar for many children, actually, that they tend to have different ideas of what they want to do in their life throughout their childhood, right? So I also had different ideas at a certain point in time. I wanted to become a chef, and all those different things. But then I think when I was in high school and I was about to graduate from high school, or a little earlier, actually, I slowly but surely got more interested in economics and politics, but especially in economics, business. And that was when I also decided to actually study business administration. I think if we also look at the the first steps of becoming an entrepreneur, I would even date that back to, I don't know what it was, 8th or 9th grade in high school, when I was doing kind of the first, let's say, arbitrage opportunities, or I was pursuing them by just going to one of those cheap shops where you get pens, pencils, all that stuff. And then I brought it to school. I basically even made little catalogs for that. And then placed these kind of special pens, special pencils within my class. That was something that I realized very late, actually, when I already started my own actual business. That might have been kind of a indicator already. But then actually a little later, as I said, when I was about to graduate from high school, I became more interested in economics and in business. And then I decided to study business administration. And that's what brought me to Berlin, actually. So I went to Berlin. I started studying at Humboldt University. So this is kind of how I got into this whole area of business, and then especially in Berlin you have the rocket internet times with entrepreneurship and startups becoming a thing. But yeah, that's kind of the story. Even though maybe I can add that as well if you're asking about my childhood, because um, that is kind of the contrary what my parents were doing actually.
Mm,
So I've like two parents who are social workers.
okay.
My brother decided to become a landscaper, and I decided to get into business, which is yeah, maybe what many people are doing, like doing kind of the opposite of what their parents
Yeah.
uh, are actually doing. But yeah, that was not like brought to me by my parents or like my family, let's say.
Mm. Yeah, it's quite interesting because it is hard to even just know what's out there in terms of business and entrepreneurship if it isn't in the family. And like I was a bit different to you. So when I was growing up, I didn't, not that I didn't have an interest. I knew I wanted to do something and make an impact. But I wasn't like you in that regard. I didn't, I wasn't selling stuff at school, um, or wanting to study business. That sort of stuff came a lot later. And I mean, my mum is a university lecturer and like valued education highly, which I value so much because it's got me to places I would never have gone to if she hadn't have done that. But I do sometimes wonder if there would have been more business minded people around me growing up, if that would have been different, or whether it just comes to you when you're ready to. But when you were at school or start going to uni to study business, did you think, I'm going to be a founder, I'm going to be an entrepreneur? Was that word even in your vocabulary, entrepreneur, or was it just a curiosity at this stage?
Yeah. Um, I would like to take a step back to
Yeah.
what you said initially, because I found that quite interesting. Because you said you came from the perspective of like you want to have an impact,
Mm,
and it's not really about the like business and studying business and like selling stuff and so on. And that is quite interesting because for me it was basically the other way around. So when I decided I want to study business at university, I had this idea of like going into business, this very naive idea of becoming a manager. Didn't even know what that would mean. But
mm,
that was kind of my idea when I was, I don't know, 17, 18 years old. And that also answers your question. Like the idea of an entrepreneur wasn't really in my mind. It was
yeah.
rather like, I don't know, I want to go into business. I want to be a manager, whatever that means.
Yeah.
And then there was actually this progress of me understanding how things work. Um, like getting introduced to private universities, for example, was like a whole new world for me. Yeah, I mean, especially the private universities in Germany. If you study business there, um, those are like the top universities. If you think
Yeah.
about like WHU or like EBS or whatever, and that was a new world to me. And then like slowly but surely, I came to understand a lot of things. And when we started Expatrio, I mean, like when I actually went into this path of becoming an entrepreneur, um, that was after a lot of um, like learnings already, and that was also after a lot of experiences that actually brought us to the point of starting Expatrio as well.
Mm,
But coming back to the initial point, for me it was the other way around. First, I was like, hey, business is interesting, economics is interesting, like being a manager is kind of this
yeah.
this like big thing in society also, at least partly. And the more I got into it, the less I was interested in being a manager,
Yeah.
especially when you start learning about leadership, not like management as opposed to leadership. Especially if you start to learn about what you can actually do when you are becoming an entrepreneur, when you have the chance to do things, to have an impact, to change things. So it was like for me, it was kind of the other way around, that I actually
Mm,
realized the more I knew about business, the less I was interested in being this kind of manager, but rather more interested in changing something and having a positive impact in what way ever.
Yeah. I think that naivety of being sort of a manager or whatever is rightly or wrongly, like, we are driven by status, especially when we're younger. So when you're like a little kid, you want to be a footballer. You see doctors on the telly, you want to be a doctor because that's kind of all you know. You know, your friend's dad has a really big house, and he's a lawyer or whatever, and so now you want to be a lawyer. That was definitely kind of what I was like growing up. It was a little bit about the status as well, and then obviously as you grow up, it gets a bit more nuanced, and there's a little bit more that comes into it.
Yeah, exactly. And that I think that's a very, very true point actually. Like the more you grow up and the more you have an idea of yourself, and the more like self-aware you are, and
Mm.
also I don't know, more strong on your opinions, better understanding the world and what's actually going on, the less, at least for me and apparently for you as well, the less you think about status in that way that you might think about it, and like when you are younger. And for me it turned away from that, and it rather turned towards this curiosity and freedom that I had initially, as well, but that like rather grew and grew. Like by now I'm doing most of the stuff I'm doing out of curiosity actually,
Okay.
and a lot of stuff also because I want to have a certain degree of freedom. And what especially changed was like this status thought
Mm.
became more of a idealistic thought, let's say, and more
Mm.
of this, hey, I want to do something that actually has a purpose or that actually changes something, right?
Mm. But to get to that level of freedom, as you say, like even an entrepreneur, like someone who starts a company, like I have my own recruitment agency. I don't have anyone above me, but I still have clients to answer to. I'm sure you have like investors to answer to. So when you've been on that journey, especially when it comes to that freedom question, have you had to sacrifice some of that in order to get the freedom you enjoy now? And how would you view the last few years of your life through the lens of how much freedom you have?
Yeah, that's a very good question. um, Maybe relevant in this like in this aspect is definitely that Expatrio is not dependent on investors,
Okay.
and that we managed to be profitable actually like very early on. So it's not like this typical approach that you usually know from like startups,
Mm.
especially like in Berlin. You oftentimes have these stories of startups being founded, and then raising a lot of money, and building a product, and then like slowly but surely getting customers, and burning money in the first years, which I think is fine, partly at least.
Yeah.
I think not for all, not for all business models that actually make sense. But for certain business models, you have to do it that way, I think.
Yeah.
But we were lucky enough that we were profitable quite early on, so we are not dependent on investors, but we can rather pursue our own ideas, which definitely is helpful if we're talking about freedom.
Mm.
So this is definitely a point where I think that um, there is a significant difference in building a startup that is dependent on investors and has to take on VC capital and like
Yeah.
give away a lot of their shares and dilute a lot. Um, on the other side, of course, still, if you build a business, even if you're not dependent on investors and you still have like the majority of the shares and all that, um, you of course sacrifice a certain degree of your freedom, because there's always like when it actually becomes a company, an organization, there's always on the one hand your responsibility for your colleagues, who are part of the company, and like whom you need to pay every month. And on the other side, of course, especially in the beginning when you want to get things off the ground and you want to get first customers and all that, then you're sacrificing a lot of your free time, right?
Yeah.
So that was definitely something where I would say that freedom was compromised in a way.
Okay.
But at the same time, like curiosity, again, like I have those two motivators, let's say, like curiosity on the one hand, freedom on the other hand, and sometimes they go hand in hand. But sometimes, for example, in the beginning, when we founded the company, curiosity was like very satisfied because I was learning something new every day, and we did something new every day, and we were
Mm.
like just people always say hustling. Yeah.
Yeah.
But on the other side, freedom then was definitely a bit less satisfied,
Yeah.
let's say.
Was it always the plan to not take investment? Was that like a principle, or is that just how it turned out?
No, that wasn't really a principle. We actually thought about it in the beginning, because also we are all coming from like a background at Rocket Internet, venture capital
Hmm.
funds, or
Yeah. So
whatever.
why
So
don't we take it back then? Probably be best to take it back to the beginning. After university, you were in the venture capital, venture developments phase. So how did your sort of career develop for this company to start, and what was the story behind Expatrio in the first place?
yeah, that makes sense. Um, yeah, maybe I quickly start with like where we left off in the beginning. So
Hmm.
I went to Berlin. I started studying here, and like I quite quickly actually found it interesting to look into finance. That was the first thing that I found interesting, and then the second thing that was interesting to me was the whole topic of entrepreneurship. I think that came through being in Berlin and experiencing also this rocket internet hype. And I focused on finance entrepreneurship in university. I went to Maastricht in the Netherlands for an exchange, focused on finance and entrepreneurship there as well. Exchange. That was very German, as I realized. And that was also part of the reason why, like after I returned and after I had like worked at a rocket venture as well in the fintech area for what was it, almost 2 years or something. Then I spent a short time in investment banking in the internet and tech sector as well. But then I went to Singapore to work with a venture capital fund, and like being in Maastricht first was also part of the reason why I actually wanted to go like further away, because in Maastricht, as I said, it was quite German. The
Hmm.
university is still, in my opinion, um, good. At least you have more practical approaches to
Yeah.
learning as compared to like typical German universities, which I've experienced before at Humboldt University here in Berlin. But again, like it was not really like a foreign exchange experience or something, but rather
Okay.
uh, very close to the German border, many German people. So then I went to Singapore, worked with a venture capital fund there, quite a small one actually, which was nice again because I had the chance to directly work with a managing partner and learned a lot from him as well. And then I basically came back to Berlin and we started Expatrio together with my two co-founders, Alex and Dominic. And why we started Expatrio, I think there were like three main reasons, I would say. And the first one is that we have all lived abroad ourselves. So we share this experience of having lived abroad ourselves. Again, like Maastricht is fine. Like you go from Germany to the Netherlands, it's in the European Union, not a problem. But then if you go to Singapore, like even though they have quite a few digitized processes and like everything is very convenient, you still have the challenge of going to a new country, right? You have to get your
Mm.
visa, you have to get insurance, you have to get like all your banking stuff, you have to get accommodation, find a flat, get a new SIM card, probably, like all those small things as well. And this is always a challenge, independent on like how progressive the country is that you're going to, let's say.
Yeah.
And that's the like that's one experience that we are all sharing. A second experience that we all share is that we have worked with internationals in Germany. So as I said, like especially in this rocket internet environment, there are so many great people from all across the globe, and they come to Germany super motivated. And then the first thing they have to deal with is German bureaucracy and paperwork.
Yeah.
And that was something that we saw as well, which was not really understandable. Let's say, why is everything so super German? Why, like German, literally German, the language.
Mm.
Why is everything analog? Why is everything fragmented? And that was the second experience that we all shared. And then these two experiences combined with our background in having built digital products before and being kind of enthusiastic about innovation, digitization, that basically brought us to seeing this opportunity of solving a certain problem for a certain target group.
Mm.
And that brought us to the idea of building like a digital platform for going to and living in Germany. In the end, what we can say now, we want to build like a holistic platform for everything you need when coming to and living in Germany as an international student. or like basically all-in-one app for your life in Germany as an international and also coming here. And that starts early on with finding your study program, applying for your study program,
Mhm.
getting your visa, coming to Germany, getting accommodation, getting your banking products, getting insurance, and so on. And yeah, that's what we started then.
Awesome. Yeah, as someone who I help people relocate to Berlin, and yeah, the bureaucracy is unbelievable. I don't know if that will ever change. But coming back to the start of the Expatrio journey, so you say that, oh, we started Expatrio, but how did that actually happen in practice? Did it sort of evolve, or did you all kind of sit in a room, or like go to a bar or a coffee shop or whatever, and say like, right, yeah, this is what we're doing, like we're going to do this? Because you kind of said it very kind of, blasé, but starting a company is a big deal. So what did you feel at that time?
It was definitely kind of a process. So we have been in touch for quite, like we knew each other for quite a while before, and we have been in touch. We were talking about like different problems we are seeing, and talking about these experiences that we all shared. And then it was kind of a process to slowly but surely start working on building a project for like solving these issues. Starting with uh, digitizing the like health insurance um, purchase for internationals in Germany, because that was one of the things we saw, or especially my co-founder Alex saw at like Rocket, where many people had to take care of their health insurance, but that was a super overwhelming topic, because even though the German health insurance system is working quite well, let's say, um, it is very hard to understand as well. Like you have, on the one hand, you have private insurance, then you have public insurance, and if you go for public insurance, and then there are 100 providers, and you don't really
Yeah.
know the difference in premiums and coverage and so on, and then everything is German, and you have to fill out like actual papers. That was not really yeah, up to date, let's say, and therefore like that was one of the thoughts, like let's digitize this. And then there was another thought, that Germany is becoming like the, by now it is the fourth biggest destination for international students in the world, and it's like continuously growing, and might even become bigger than Australia and become the third biggest one, the biggest non-English speaking already. And that was what we saw as well. And we discovered a so-called like blocked account, which international students especially, but basically all people who are not coming from the European Union to Germany without an income, have to set up. And then it's kind of a proof of financial resources.
Mm.
And those were the things that we like looked into, started with, and then you first built like kind of a pitch deck to explain to yourself what you are actually doing,
Yeah.
then explaining to potential partners what you want to do. And especially my two co-founders, Alex and Dominic, they came from a insurance background already. So especially this insurance topic, they actually started to work on that a little earlier than like before I joined, while I was still in Singapore working with a venture capital fund. They like already created some slides to talk to our like insurance partner, and yeah, then slowly but surely it became more than just a project, and we launched the platform, and then we had first customers from day one on, basically.
Mm.
And then we
Awesome.
realized, okay, this is not just a project anymore, but rather becoming, yeah, kind of a company. And then after, I think, what was it, like 3-4 months, we had the first people joining the team.
Wow, it's
Yeah,
quick.
and
It's
then
quick progress.
yeah, I mean, the first 3-4 months after launch of the platform.
Yeah.
So the company was founded in mid 2017. Then
Yeah.
in January 2018, we launched the platform. In between, we were like working behind the scenes on this project, and then we launched, and then we had customers, thankfully, and then we had to take care of those customers at the same
Mm.
time, continue to work on the platform, and then that made it necessary to have the first colleagues as well.
Coming back to like that day one, you've got company name, you've incorporated the company, you get that first draft of the website through. It's like incredibly exciting times, and it's all new and it's all shiny, and you want to tell everyone about it. But for you personally, jumping from employment to eventually sort of going full time as a founder, how was that for you in your life? How did that impact things? And can you remember like what your emotions were at that time?
I think like one of the or what made it easier for me to just like live with all that is that I was still very young,
Mm,
and that I've never been in like long-term employment. I've never like earned proper money, let's say. And again, like when the company has been incorporated, I was 21, and when we launched the platform, I was 22. And that was a time where I was just young, and I was like, hey, this is exciting. Like my curiosity, of course, was there, and my drive for freedom as well. And I saw like huge opportunity to work with these two guys who also had more experience than I did, of course. And I saw a huge opportunity to learn, and to like pursue something that actually makes sense, that solves a problem for a certain group of people, as I said earlier. And I didn't really ask myself like, should I do that? Or I did, of course, but then the
mm,
alternative was continuing to work in venture capital, for example, or going into consulting or whatever. But building something, and that is what I enjoyed when working for the fintech before. Building something is something else than just advising people who are building something,
yeah,
and or investing into people who are building something. Also super exciting, and like you also learn a lot there. But I think actually like jumping into the cold water, let's say, and just pursuing this idea, um, that was something that I found interesting, and at the same time I was kind of proud as well, I would say,
yeah.
that we can like build this company, and that I can work with the other two guys on this project. um yeah, and then again, like it turned somehow from a project into an actual company.
Wow, at 21 as well, because I'm guessing you must have been the only one out of your friends that would have done something like that at that time.
Yeah.
How did your
That is actually something that was sometimes a bit challenging as well, because usually like you're dealing with like older people, and most of your peers are studying, or like, yeah, most of them studying basically, um, and others are like going into employment or so.
yeah,
And it was never something where I thought this is like really differentiating us. But what I was missing sometimes was that I could talk to someone my age about the things that I'm experiencing on a daily basis, and the challenges
yeah,
that I'm facing, or that we are facing. And that was not really possible with people in my age.
yeah,
And I was very I was very happy, very grateful when I, at a certain point, found kind of a community of people who are like my age, basically, and who also founded companies in a younger age already. Because that gave me the opportunity to actually talk to other people my
yeah.
age, who are having the same problems, who are having the same challenges on a daily basis, and who are working on similar things. And yeah, that was very cool, and very like enriching, let's say, and very
Mm.
valuable to like meet people who actually are in a similar age doing similar stuff.
It's such a buzz, isn't it? I do kind of resonate with that. I was a bit old. I was 25 when I started this kind of recruiting business, and obviously it's not it's different to a tech company. But yeah, you want to speak to someone who just gets it, just gets what you're saying, and everyone's got their own shit going on. Employment as well is incredibly stressful, and there's other stuff that's way more important. Health problems, family, all that stuff. But just to speak to someone who just gets it is so liberating. And yeah, when you don't have those types of people around you, it can be lonely because you just want someone to vent to at times. So no, I completely get that. Did it affect like your friendships at all with sort of your, I suppose, university friends or school friends at that time? Because when you first start a company, there isn't much money. So the currency you do have, especially when you're 21 as well, is time and energy and being able to function on less sleep than the normal person. So how did those first sort of, I don't know, first few months or a year look like in your life? And when we relate it back to also to that freedom theme.
Also, a very good question. I have a feeling that it did not really affect my friendships. I think there is like a natural way of like separating with certain people, or like
Yeah,
going a different way, and then not staying in touch forever, of course.
yeah,
But I think that was not really fueled by me like becoming an entrepreneur, or I think my good friends I always stayed in touch with, and we were still like going out, we were still meeting, and it was just less. It was definitely less. Um, but another thing is also that, especially in Berlin, like you have such a high fluctuation. And many from my like childhood friends, they were not in Berlin at all, so they
yeah.
were like still in my hometown, or some of them were somewhere else in Germany. And by now, actually, a few of them are in Berlin as well. I think like after a while, many people try or like stop by in Berlin, let's say. But back then, like childhood friends weren't here anyway, so I just saw them when I went home.
Yeah,
And the other people from university, like quite a few people actually moved away after university. And the few that were here, we definitely met less, I would say. But we still managed to see each other. So yeah, I would say it did like compromise friendships to a certain degree, but not to a degree that they would like suffer too much, or that there would be like a loss of contact at
sure,
all.
sure, awesome. That's always good to keep that kind of healthy relationship, especially with childhood friends as well, because that is something special. But in those early days, what was your work life balance like?
Yeah, in the early days, as I mentioned earlier, I think that is more or less normal. But I don't want to speak for others. But for me, it was definitely like primarily work.
Mm,
So it was primarily building this business, which was of course an opportunity, a learning opportunity, but of course also you have an opportunity to like build something big and then earn money with it afterwards as well. Of course, that's also a component. And therefore, like getting things off the ground and like writing the first business plans, creating first like pitch decks, creating the product itself, like the logic for the product, creating the like web platform, and all that was definitely my priority during that time. Yeah, so there were definitely weeks where I was working and sleeping, and that's it. Um, but there were also like coma weeks, and it was also a choice, I would say.
yeah,
Yeah, so it was not like we were forced to spend all our time on like growing this project into a company, but it was rather a lot of fun because also again, like my motivation of learning and the curiosity was definitely satisfied, and the freedom, while it was compromised, it was also satisfied because I was working on my future freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like two different levels, I would say, because if you are your own boss in your future, it's getting a bit easier, I would say, than like as compared to um, being like in employment.
Yeah.
And that's like two different levels of this freedom thing then. Um, yeah, but definitely like work-life balance was work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as it's that's a pretty normal thing to do. But when you think back, were there any times where you think, "Good, that was actually really stressful, that situation, and maybe something went wrong with the business or a client or something," and you think, "God, how did I get through that?" What's been, and maybe just in general, actually, what has been your relationship with stress since your time being a founder?
Mm. I think that's a good thing to talk about actually, because I think oftentimes it's like it's a bit like too romantic, the story of being a founder maybe.
Yeah.
So I think it makes sense to talk about that, because of course it's stressful, and you have weeks where you are primarily working, and then you might even dream about what you're working. I think that goes for, or I know that goes for all the people who are working a lot. I also know like people who are in, I don't know, big law firms or something. They say the same. So if you're working all the time, you might even start dreaming about it. But the good thing is,
Mm.
on the other hand, you also have like coma periods again. But you also, and that is quite an important thing, I would say, you also have to make sure you get coma times.
Mm.
So you cannot run just like run, but rather make sure that you have time for doing what you like besides work, that you have time for like calming down. Yeah, and it might be like, for me, for example, it's reading books and being in nature. And that's also something I realized over the past few years. Like while I love being in like a big city like Berlin, and I love socializing and I love meeting people every night, um, at the same time, I also like a bit of like calmness and having the time to actually sit down and read something, and not a business book.
Yeah.
Of course, like I'm also reading quite a few business books, but sitting down and reading like fiction or whatever you like, and having time to be in nature, that is something that's for me quite important. And whatever it is for you, you should make sure that you take the time to calm down, to have like calming down periods, because otherwise, at a certain point in time, your body will tell you that you have to calm down now,
Yeah.
and that's what we should try to avoid by actively taking like coma periods, even though it can be stressful at times, or it will be stressful at times. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, making
Has
sure that you have these like relaxing periods as well, where you can recharge.
Yeah. Has there been times where the stress has ran away from you and got too much, and maybe you've had to have a conversation with yourself, and or someone's had to have a conversation with you?
um, at least I didn't realize if someone wanted to tell me that it's getting too much.
Mm.
I mean, of course, like sometimes your parents say you're working a lot, um, and that's true. But I think it never was at a stage where it was like really for a long time way too much.
Yeah.
Um, but of course, I ongoingly talk to myself, at least by now, or like I question what I'm doing, or like I'm reflecting on what you could do differently, or what you should do differently. For example, taking relaxing periods,
Yeah.
um, and nevertheless, there were times where actually my body told me to slow down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not talking about like actual burnout, which can be something that can happen as well. But I'm rather talking about I'm just sick for 2 days.
Yeah.
And this is something that I have experienced like 2 3 times after a
Hmm.
very busy period. And then when this like one milestone is done, then my body was like, okay, we're done with this milestone. Okay, cool. Then shut down.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that's not really healthy. But yeah, that happens.
Yeah. I've suffered from the same thing actually, where just you're fine, working, bang, 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 and then boom, you're just so tired and just cannot move. That must be like a defense mechanism for the body to get out of a stressful situation.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
definitely. But I think like I find it quite fascinating that you can manage to achieve the goal or the milestone that you want to achieve, and then once your body and your like brain maybe realize, okay, we have done what we wanted to do, then it's like, okay, shut
yeah.
down, and you just I don't know, need to recover for 2 days.
Yeah, absolutely, and yeah, it's not healthy. But I do think, especially in like the working world, the relationship with stress and recovery is absolutely changing now. You know, rest is productive. I've talked about this a lot on this podcast actually, because burnout is something, and just getting ill after working so much is something that it's happened not a lot, but a few times over the years. And I think back to so many times where I was just suboptimal in what I was doing because I was just working like way too much, and you just get so kind of inefficient and things like that.
Yeah,
Are
there
you?
was maybe just one quick comment on that,
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
that was also I think one of the most important realizations we had after a while, because again, like we all were coming from like fast paced backgrounds with like venture capital and or like startups, rocket internet, like all that, and after a while, I would say about like, I don't know, 2 years into the business or something, we more and more came to the realization that it's not all about these business metrics like customer numbers, customer
Mm,
growth, revenue, and like growth all the time. Um, but at the same time, it's equally important to actually look at a like healthy culture, which also includes the topic of stress and recovery, and work-life balance. And by now, even more than ever, also the possibility to work flexibly, work flexible hours, work flexibly in terms of location, and at the same time, focusing not only on growing the numbers all the time, but also focusing on like growing your team, like not number wise, not in a quantitative way, but rather giving an opportunity for the people within your team to grow themselves
mm,
personally, professionally. That leadership is quite an important like factor of becoming a more successful company as well. That organizational development is a crucial factor for being able to further scale.
yeah.
And I think that was um, yeah, one of the most important realizations we had after a while, where we like managed to get first customers, get first revenue, that we came to the realization, okay, we also really have to focus on leadership, people development,
Yeah.
organizational development, and make sure that we set the structures for further growth and for being able to actually further scale.
Mm. But how do you measure that? You can measure customers' money in the bank. As human beings, we focus on. I think one of the bad things about modern society, and you can talk about social media and all that stuff. We focus on things that are easiest to measure. We focus on people who have, you know, what's their net worth, how many hours a week do they work, how many followers do they have on Instagram. So when you take this more like holistic approach, like it's great, but maybe you could share some advice on this. Like, how do you measure a more relaxed working culture? How do you measure the stress levels of your employees and the flexibility? How do you measure a leadership? Because I know that for many companies out there, that when things go badly, that they will always revert back to the things that they can measure the easiest because they have
Mm.
control, some control over that.
Yeah, I think that's actually a true theory that, and that also like differentiates to a certain degree management and leadership. Yeah, so like on the management side, you can you focus on the business, you focus on like quantitative aspects, you have KPIs that need to be fulfilled, and you can measure those things very well. If you look at leadership, I think what you it's oftentimes much more qualitative than quantitative. And you can rather look at what kind of infrastructure is there, what kind of initiatives are taken within this organization to make sure that people have the chance to grow, that there's, I don't know, like feedback and review culture, um, that there's the possibility to like express what you're thinking, that there's like this emotional safety, and I think factors you can look at in this regard are, at least for us, quite relevant factors are, on the one hand, alignment, transparency, and focus. Yeah, and they again are very hard to measure, obviously.
Yeah.
But this is something, for example, why we introduced OKRs, why we all together like worked on defining our purpose statement, defining our vision statement. Of course, it was always kind of there implicitly, but we got all together to actually get like a formulation that everyone can identify with. Yeah, I think this is also a thing that you can look at, how, to what degree are the people being involved at the organization. Yeah, are they like, is there just like the leadership team that are taking all the decisions, or is there also kind of like bottom up approaches? Is there
Mm.
the possibility to participate in certain decisions? And we also, like, we did the same for our core values. So we try to, where possible, we try to get everyone in the room, and we try to have like workshops with everyone, coming from an individual level maybe first, going to like smaller groups, going to the like organization wide level, to make sure that everyone has the at least the opportunity to participate, and whether they want to in the end is up to them. Of course, it's also a bit up to you, like how much you can like contribute to their
Mhm.
motivation. But yeah, it definitely is hard to measure, and it's more
Yeah.
qualitative than quantitative, I think, if you look at like the leadership measures and
Yeah.
how organizational structures are being set up. But there are certain things that you can look at to at least have an indication.
Amazing. Yeah, I think a lot of companies should take a leaf out of that book, because I hear from people otherwise working in the recruitment industry or even in tech, where it's just that sort of stuff just is not valued. But I wanted to move on, because I'm sure we'll need to finish up soon. But you've been on this journey now for a few years, and something I like to ask all the founders is, you do all the hard work, especially at the beginning, and then things go along. There's ups and downs, but can you think of a moment where it was all worth it for you, where something happened and you thought, this is why I've done this?
Where I realized it was worth it.
Yeah, so joining this Expatrio journey.
Yeah, one thing that immediately comes to my mind is when you read through the reviews of our customers, and that is sometimes it's really like heartwarming. Sometimes it's just like nice to see. Yeah, also like from a business perspective, that we have like fast processes, or that the UX is appreciated, or the UI is appreciated, or something like that. But as we are like building a project that also is an integral part of the lives of the people who are using it,
Mm,
because they are coming to Germany, they have to set up a so-called blocked account, they have to get their insurance, they like need all that stuff, and then they can use our platform to actually get it in an aggregated, digitized way. And therefore, it's always a huge project for those people, a huge change as well. And when everything goes well, I think they are even more relieved than if you get your groceries within 10 minutes, for example. And this is nothing against the gorillas or so. I'm using it myself sometimes, but you know what I mean, right?
yeah.
And if you read through these reviews, that is like, if they say, thank you so much for making my way to Germany easier,
Mm,
or if they mention that like our customer support has helped them quite a lot with like even nitty gritty small things, and you know how much time and effort we are spending on providing like great customer support. By the way, if you're into that, you can read Delivering Happiness from the Seth Oscar founder. Um, it's quite a good book as well.
What's it called? Sorry, Delivering Happiness.
Like Delivering Happiness, you can read about that, or you can read that book if you're into customer support or if you want to improve your customer support. And we are into customer support, and we are like spending a lot of time on automating our processes, making everything more seamless for the customers,
Mm,
giving them as much self-service as possible, making all the information transparent and available in our like knowledge hub and all that, and always being there on the phone for them, not primarily tracking the time that agents are needing to like solve a ticket or
mm,
like for a phone call or something, but rather keeping in mind that there are humans who are having a huge step in their life. They are going from one end of the world to the other.
yeah.
And then they also have to transfer quite a lot of money to this blocked account to prove that they have enough financial resources and so on. And when you then see their reviews and they say, thank you so much for making the whole process easier, or yeah, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. Otherwise, what makes it worth it, I think also another thing is, um, if I come to our office, like if I think about 2 days ago, even though we by now have kind of a remote first
Mm,
approach, or like in general like a hybrid work approach with remote first, everyone is like properly equipped at home, so that they can work from home if they want to, or they can come to the office as well. But most people, if they are doing focus work, are staying home and then coming to the office for meetings. And like 2 days ago, the office was actually quite crowded, and I came there and I saw the office itself, which is by now quite satisfying because it's quite cozy and has like a nice vibe, I would say. And then you see the people there who are happy and like are either having a coffee and laughing or like
mm,
working concentrated on something. And it's just like this nice atmosphere of great people. Then that's also definitely a moment where I think, okay, that
yeah,
was worth it.
absolutely. It's amazing that both things you mentioned there are both about people, and
True. Yeah.
yeah, I think, and that is what it's all about. I think, I mean, I sometimes if I speak to someone who's like, a lot older, they always say their memories, the best memories they have, are always to do with people. But I love your. I think that's what's great about your product and the services. You know, you're doing a job for them, but you're giving people peace of mind who are making a huge leap, which is so valuable for these people. And as I said, I help people relocate as well, and these people just want um, peace of mind. At the end of the day, it's so critical for them. So, last question of the evening. I know it's getting into the evening for you. What would you say to someone who is maybe just started on the actually not just started, who's maybe about to start or thinking that they might want to start their own business? It might be a tech company, it might be an agency, it might be just quitting their full time job to pursue their passion. What sort of one or two bits of advice would you give that person?
Um, I think like two important things, especially at that stage, like when they think about starting or when they are about to start, are one thing is like ask yourself what you want to do in life. Like be clear about your purpose or your like why are you here, what are you doing, why do you want to build this product or service or company. Because if you cannot answer that, or if you cannot um, actually identify with what you are about to build, then maybe you should reconsider. And this is I think one important thing that I would actually suggest everyone to think about their like what do they want to do with life, what do they want to contribute to, and that is the first piece of advice. Definitely another one at that stage is that I would say start. I mean, this is one of these 7 habits as well. Like, start with an end in mind,
Yeah.
or at least a first end. I mean, you always adjust your vision on the way, and you always like find new opportunities, or expansion path or whatever. But start with an end in mind, and don't just like start running without knowing where you're running. I think this is quite helpful to be able like to keep that in mind, and to like readjust your path if you might get off your path. At the same time, and I think this is always the kind of a little bit contradictory, like focusing on the end and focusing on a certain goal that you want to achieve, but at the same time enjoying the process, enjoying the way there. Yeah, it's not only about the goal that is here, but it's also about like enjoying right now, and enjoying like the path to your goal, and the process towards your vision, or towards this end that you have in mind. If you want to have another book suggestion on that, there's it's getting very philosophical. It's by Seneca, an old philosopher, and
Yeah.
he wrote about the shortness of life. I think it's called in English on the shortness of
See,
life.
he's the Stoic philosopher, isn't he?
Yes,
Yeah, yeah. He's
Stoic approaches in general can come in quite
mm,
handy, I think, in life from time to time.
yeah, Stoic. But Stoicism is basically just it's how you approach the external, isn't it? And how you perceive things, and is a problem actually a problem, or are you perceiving it as a problem?
Yeah,
Have I
especially
got
if,
that right?
if it's not in your power. Like, if you
Yeah,
cannot do anything about it,
yeah,
you cannot do
yeah.
anything about it anyways.
Absolutely. Well, it's always good to end on a philosophical note. But Tim, amazing conversation. Thank you so much for coming on. And yeah, I know there'll be plenty of people out there that will get so much value from what you've just said.
That would be awesome.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Building Our World podcast. Every view, stream, and download is massively appreciated. If you're new here, then please go back through the catalogue. There's some great gems from some of the brightest and the best in Berlin tech. And if you really like what you hear, then please do hit that follow and subscribe button. That's it for now. But until next time, goodbye.